So, as the chair of the president, excuse me, of the TriMet Board of Directors, I'm going to call the meeting for Wednesday, May 28, 2014 to order. And the first agenda item, or the first item on the agenda, is the public forum. Remind folks that we have the forum that starts at our right now, 9 o'clock, and will go for a maximum of 45 minutes. I have, I believe, 9 individuals who've signed up to speak this morning, so you'll have 3 minutes to speak to the board. I want to also say that if individuals wish to share additional information, they may complete the comment card that will be provided to the board and made part of the record. The names we have are as a result of the sign-up that we have a half hour open before this meeting begins from 8:30 to 9, and the comments are going to be taken in the order of the sign-up. And I don't think we'll have any problem fitting everybody in as long as everybody abides by the time limit of 3 minutes. So with that, I'm going to start right into that. I'll call you up a couple at a time. Sandra Angel from the Swan Island TMA and Brian Posowitz with Sellwood Moreland Improvement League. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sarah, would you like to begin first?
Thank you. I'm Sarah Angel. I'm the director of the Swan Island TMA. I'm also the interim executive director of the Swan Island Business Association. So Swan Island has been in the headlines an awful lot lately. Perhaps you've heard. There are a number of attention-getting events that are coming to the island in the near-term future. From where I sit, I can paint an apocalyptic, very exciting outcome of all of these developments. If we prepare properly, the island can look at this next chapter as a time in increased employment, a time of increased collaboration across the region, and access to education. Between all of the developments we have coming down the pike, you've heard of the Daimler expansion on the island that will bring approximately 1,400 new and relocating employees to the region. Several hundred construction workers in the next 6 months. FedEx is returning to the island. That will bring with it another approximately 150 employees. Vigor, the country's largest dry dock, will be in place in the next several months, and you probably also heard the merger with Oregon Iron Works, which will change the dynamics of the region, of the island considerably. These are together things that make me stay awake at night, but I think what will make us able to meet the challenges and the opportunities in this next chapter is a very strong partnership with TriMet. We are lucky to have some of the best access in the region in any industrial center in Portland. But we're concerned that may not get us to where we need to go if it's not increased. We're looking at ideally increased service on the 85 to help us meet that, in addition to increased service across the board. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. It really is exciting about what's going on down there, and so we're pleased to have that kind of challenge, I think, here in the region. So.
It's a good problem to have.
Good. Any comments or thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Joe Wesman. About 3 or 4 months ago, I approached the staff here because I knew about the project, the new high-rise down there, and said, are we looking at that? And I believe there's a team working together with the business groups, et cetera, because there's only one way in and out. So,
exactly.
So, yeah, good.
That's correct. There is a Swan Island task force. We've been working with TriMet closely. Good. And yep.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to make comments today. My name is Brian Posowitz, and I am the chair of the Transportation Committee of the Sellwood Moreland Improvement League, which is the official neighborhood association for the Sellwood Westmoreland area. My comments today are based on what I hear in the neighborhood as the chair of that committee. We meet once a month and people talk to me on the side, and I'm also a member of the board of directors of the neighborhood association. But I do need to say that my comments are not an official position of the Sellwood Moreland Neighborhood Association. I came here primarily to say that people in the neighborhood are very happy to see the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line that will go right by our neighborhood, and we'll have stations at the Tacoma Street overpass and at Bybee Boulevard. There is a significant concern in the neighborhood about bus access and bus service to the Tacoma Street station. And specifically, the concern is that that station will be set off quite a ways from established pedestrian routes, and there's a big overpass at Tacoma Street going over McLaughlin Boulevard, and the way you would get down to the station is by a sort of a long ramp. And there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who may not be at the peak of their physical fitness, who are saying they're not going to be able to use that station if the only way to get to it is to walk to it. For one thing, it's a long walk to the top of the overpass. For another, it's going to be a long walk from the top down to the station. And so what, I feel like it's almost a consensus position from what I've heard in the neighborhood. People really, really want to see bus service to that station and also bus access to that station, meaning buses get all the way down to the station. And my understanding of the current state of TriMet planning on this issue is that the initial plans did not contemplate bus access all the way down into that station. There's some planning going on now, my understanding is, and the planning is currently open on that issue. They're exploring that, and they may propose that. And so I'm just here to say that I very much encourage TriMet to provide full bus service and full bus access to the light rail station at the Tacoma Street overpass. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your comments. Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Appreciate both of you coming. All right, let's go on to the next two. We have Daniel Wegner from Portland Community College and Jessica Reyes from Bus Riders Unite and Bear Day. Daniel, I think you're up first.
Sure. Thank you so much for the
Good
opportunity
morning.
to speak today. And I'm Daniel Wenger from Portland Community College, the Cascade campus, where I serve as the Division Dean for Arts and Professions. And I'm here primarily to express our gratitude, PCC's gratitude, for TriMet's assistance with transportation to Swan Island in connection with the opening of the trades facility, the Swan Island Trade Center, that is opening in the fall of 2014. We purchased property on Swan Island to enhance our connectivity with a valued sector of Portland's economy and to connect with business and provide training for upward mobility for employees on the island. And we're locating a number of programs to the Swan Island Trade Center. Our Trades and Industry Department, which includes our Limited Maintenance Electricians Program, our Stationary Engineers Program, our Manufacturing Plant Electricians Program. Those are apprenticeship programs. Our new apprenticeship program for millwrights, our Facilities Maintenance Technology degree, our HVAC Installer Certificate, and our Pre-Apprenticeship Program. Also exciting for the fall, with our HVAC Installer Certificate, we're offering an exclusive track for English as a second language learners. And it's basically the HVAC Installer's career pathway with wraparound support services for ESL students. So we're opening that center. We expect about 650 students to be traveling to Swan Island in the fall, and TriMet has been fantastic in reaching out to us. I'm new to the area, so it was really great to be receiving emails and phone calls from TriMet, people that knew what we were doing, found out who I was, and reached out and asked, what do you need on the island? And added some services to Line 85, specifically to serve the students that are coming in during the evening for our trades programs. So thank you very much for your help, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Daniel, thank you for coming. Jessica.
Very quickly, Daniel, when you get done here, I would like to talk to you
Okay.
about apprenticeship.
Okay.
Jessica, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, TriMet Board. My name is Jessica Reyes. I live in Oregon City. I am a member of the Bus Riders Unite. La que quiero decir primeramente es mi corto testimonio hoy. Es que no es relacionado sobre ustedes como individuales personas. Mi testimonio es basado en cómo el comité en total trabajo y hacen decisiones por las razones en cómo me siento sobre este comité trabaja, las reglas de usan. No respetan mi tiempo como un pasajero del autobús o mi límite como una persona de bajos recursos económicamente. Balanceado 3 trabajos. Yo atendí la junta de marzo del comité de TriMet en la orilla de Oregon City y llegué tarde una hora a mi trabajo porque el comité no respetó sus propias reglas sobre cómo están juntas debe de ser. Testimonios públicos tenían que empezar a las 9 y ser limitadas 3 minutos por presentador. Pero TriMet invitó a varias personas para hablar antes de miembros de la comunidad, como yo fuimos dejados hablar y ellos fueron limitados a 3 minutos regla. Esto significa que yo no puedo dar mi testimonio hasta después de las 10. Más de una hora después de los testimonios públicos deberían comenzar y fui directada a hacer mi ya corto comentario más corto, porque yo me sentía suficiente fuerte sobre lo que quería decir y ya había hecho el viaje a la junta. Me quedé para compartir mis pensamientos y el resultado. Llegué tarde a mi trabajo, pero mucha gente lo tiene más peor que yo. No es suficiente que yo no pueda llegar a la junta a las 10 en un miércoles porque no puedo afrontar perder horas o llegar tarde a trabajar. Ellos no quieren gastarse dinero en una tarifa muy cara para dar su testimonio a un comité que no ha probado que están escuchando o que ellos puedan entender o comprender las vidas y esperanzas como yo. Otra vez, no es personal. Yo no los conozco y estoy segura que muchos de ustedes son personas admirables, pero ustedes no representan pasajeros y ustedes no son contables a nosotros. Yo siento que este comité me robó una hora de mi pago un día porque el comité ni pudo seguir sus propias reglas que ellos pusieron ahí, pero el tiempo, locación y las reglas de esta junta no son el problema. Las voces de los pasajeros como yo no soltamos necesitadas ser escuchados y comprendidos. Personas como yo deberemos estar en este comité haciendo decisiones sobre el transporte, pero la manera de este comité representa pasiones allí por el gobernador y no es contable a los pasajeros o tener requisitos voladores en el quien pueda estar el comité. Ese sistema presentable nunca va a ser necesario de nosotros y los pasajeros. Thank you for your time.
Gracias.
And maybe we could also get that translated for us. So
I was going to ask if we could get
Yeah.
an English translation. Which is,
That's up to Opal, but that's all I have to say.
yeah, that's great. I'm looking to staff to give
We
us-
can do that from
Yeah,
the
thank you very much.
transcription.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. The next two are Joelle Mazzaro from Opal and Naomi Andrus from Opal and Cat. Good morning.
Good morning.
Joelle, please.
Hello, my name is Joelle, and I am a senior at Catlin Gable. I learned about Opal last summer and have been working with the organization for my senior project. I'm happy to hear that Youth Pass has been extended to next school year and that the youth fare is proposed to decrease. This will benefit those who find it difficult to pay for the fare and monthly bus passes. During my freshman and sophomore years, I attended Roosevelt High School and benefited from the Youth Pass program. It allowed me to get to school and to my extracurricular activities, and additionally, both of my parents were unemployed at the time, so Youth Pass also lessened the financial stress on my family. Then for my junior and senior year, I transferred to Catlin Gable, a private school where I did not get Youth Pass. I struggled with finding the means to pay for a bus pass. This year, my school began a bus pass program, which provides free monthly bus passes to a small select number of students. It has helped me a lot, but I'm only eligible for a few months in the school year. I continue to struggle to find ways to pay for a bus pass during the month that the school does not provide one. Students should not be struggling to find transportation to the activities and opportunities in their lives. This is why I ask for Youth Pass to be expanded to all schools within the whole Multnomah County, including those in East Portland. My peers at David Douglas, Park Rose, Centennial, Reynolds, Gresham, Sam Barlow, Springwater Trail, and Alpha, among others, still do not have Youth Pass. I ask that Youth Pass be extended to these schools and that service in these areas is increased so that the people who need it the most can connect to the schools and extracurriculars, because transit is a lifeline to opportunity.
Joel, thank you very much. Good comments. I would point out that one of the desires of this board is to have this program be a regional program. In fact, we're hoping we actually have a model now that can be replicated with other school districts. So we look forward to discussions with other school districts how that may be interested in this in the future, because I think there's many benefits as you described, in addition to letting people become familiar with the operation of transit and being familiar and comfortable with it. So thank you for your comments. They're very much appreciated. Good.
President?
Yes.
Also, I'd like to too, because it says something that importance to me. I would also appreciate your support for students in Washington and Clackamas County also, not just Multnomah County. There are a lot of students in those counties too that also do not have access to student pass programs. And I think it's important that we make this available to all of our students within our district, not just those in Multnomah County.
Thank you. Yes. Naomi?
Good morning, my name's Naomi Keiko, and今日はあなた方TriMetの理事会員の前で日本語で証言するために仕事に遅刻していきます。以前2回この部屋であなたたちの前で英語で証言したんですが、その時の私の言葉があなたたちに伝わらなかったような気がしました。今日は日本語で話しているこの言葉があなたたちに伝わらないと同じように、どうすれば私たちのメッセージがこの言葉の壁を乗り越えてあなた方に伝わるのだろうかと、私たちはみんな一生懸命考えてみました。私たちの経験があまりにも違うから、我々がどれだけ声を上げてでも私たちの言葉の意味が通じないのだと気がつき始めました。毎日高級交通機関を頼りにしている人たちの問題を毎日車で仕事に通っている人には分かってもらえるわけがないのではないかと思います。私たちの言葉を壁の向こう側に告げるためには、公共交通会員を頼りにしている人が私たちの代表として壁を乗り越えなければならないのではないかと思います。やはりTriMetの理事会が共同交通管理業のために尽くすのなら、我々の苦労や悩みに共感できなければならないんですが、どれだけ長く私が日本語であなたたちに話すのが意味がないように、どれだけ長く私たちがあなたたちに疑問をつけても意味ないのではないかと思ってしまった上、理事会の構造自体を変えなければならないのではないかという仲間が正しいのではないかと思います。Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And again, same comment there. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Good. So the next two, and I may butcher this name, Harima Naduchi, Nicole Johnson.
Good morning. My name is Halima Abdullahi. أولي أنا وابن تقوي هدنا سين ما يرها سين شو إنه كسون كواغان قلتهم تتكن تروون نمان كواغان قلدا كدريرة أراجع وات يبكون مروين أراجع يبكونوا هم بارك مكديو روب مكديو يواس نمان أتكاد مسين شو cause you know why because like كوا دي قلت لنا كاد نوال مسين سيا string مسين سيا so I try my best to try my نمان فهم ويتن one of them in a studio and found the so and I didn't try in an environment no my mother because it soon like that home meeting but it's soon one man and one of them get Aragoina or soon at the kind of Aragoitan, you know. Had the year kind of mother, Mugio like on family being up now. Try walat un basta koroin maran kaska. Mirkas un bana basta koroin. Hadde di o walat basta go beasus ter badiano. Mai un iwane lipkan lipkan badane maragoitina. Hat sidang usun sharus sidang men sharu ina bedel tan fin fadoy. Adi bedel waitino wa ke usun lew. Lako un had sam wal musina no. Okay. And ana tegal to me. Lalu tegal det kia isku yak nama ila tegal tume det kan he de rowen nama yon det tegal tumo un rowen un rowen wa ke wam thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Nicole?
Hi, good morning, board.
Good morning.
My name is Nicole Johnson. Can you hear me? I don't want to speak too far. I am the youth organizer at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon, and I would like to have my testimony today be around the youth pass and the youth fare decrease. First of all, I'd really like to thank you all for moving forward, hopefully, by the end of this meeting with that. I, talk to a lot of youth, and I know that this decrease is really important to them, and it's going to make a difference, especially for the youth who don't get youth pass. As far as the youth who do receive youth pass, particularly one of our youth leaders, it's really great because it allows her to have one more year in school where she doesn't have to worry about paying for transportation. So it's really important. Although I would like to say that the way that you made the decision, it wasn't meaningful. It didn't include meaningful participation from youth. We had our transit justice, our youth summit on transit justice. It was May 17th, and unfortunately, none of you were there. But there were staff that were there at the transit justice summit, and we created policy recommendations to bring to you and to other entities that would help our youth around transportation. Those decisions were made at May 17th and later. And the recommendations for the youth fare decrease and for youth pass did not include those. So as youth, as a body coming to you with policies that they created on their own, they weren't included. And so that means that their voice was not included in the decisions that you made. So as BRU members, as Opal, we feel that you're not making decisions that include us, which is... It's not how you do it, and we feel that this board needs to be reformed. It's not you as individual people, it's the system. And the system needs to work for the people who need it the most, and it's not right now. And that's what we would like to change. So thank you for the great things that you have done, but we need to make sure that we work together to do better. Thank you.
Nicole, thanks for your comments. I do want to make clear that we're not going to be actually taking action today on the youth fairs because it's an ordinance. We have our first reading and a public hearing today, which is another opportunity for you to provide input and suggestions from your group to this board on changes that may be made or should be made to that ordinance, so we can again make any changes that we believe are necessary from a policy and program method before we actually take action on this ordinance. So the whole idea of today is actually to provide that another opportunity for people to provide meaningful input on this. So again, we hope you'll stick around, and if you have some substantive comments on the ordinance itself, we'd really like to hear them, but I'm glad you're supportive.
I think that the policy recommendations that came out of the youth summit will speak for themselves.
All right, good. Any other comments here? All right, good. Thank you. And then last but not least is Vivian Satterfield.
Good morning, Chair Warner, members of the board. My name is Vivian Satterfield. I'm the Associate Director at Opal Environmental Justice. 我的名字也是史一层，所以大家早。我今天跟我的同辈的巴士车乘客团结到你们前面，就是要给你们说一句话。这句话是我们实话实说。我们要说这一句话，因为我们真的感觉你们不懂我们的经验，我们坐巴士车的经验，天天在坐车是什么样。我们的经验你们都是不明白。我今天用我的母语的中文来跟你说，因为如果我用英文，你也不会明白，你也不会听进去，所以我就是用我的母语普通话来跟你说，我们实话实说。你有这个责任来听我们，真的懂我们的经验。因为你们不懂，我们也要说，应要改革这个董事会。好，谢谢。
David Sell. I guess it is not last. You're not last. David Sell wanted to come up and talk to us a little bit about safety.
Appreciate you letting me interrupt a little bit.
Bruce, can I say something?
Please.
So, I want to certainly thank Opal for the potpourri of incredible languages that we heard this morning. That was something that was very enriching, that I really enjoyed. And I thank you for coming and testifying. What I will take a little bit of offense to is the fact that this board, myself and the other board members included, are very, very dedicated to the task at hand and everything that Opal wants to look for and move forward as Bus Riders Unite. The comment that really actually affected me the most was the fact that this board is not listening to the individuals that utilize our system and our service the most, and that's the youth that they're referencing. You know, and I think to the times that I've sat with Opal and Opal members and Opal's leadership, and consistently I have heard their focus on two things: transfer times and youth fairs. And I believe this board has been consistent in listening and taking action, you know, in congruence with the idea of sustainable organization. And, you know, I sit here, as you can probably tell, a little bit frustrated that there's been this call for reform when each of my board members, each of the board members and myself are committed intensely in the idea of making sure the youth utilize this service at the highest and best level that they can. And to say that we have not included and engaged in the conversation is something that I cannot sit here with a comfortability and say has not occurred. Now, it may have not occurred in the exact way that certain constituents and stakeholders have desired, but I can tell you the message has been drummed into each of us numerous times to the degree that we have listened and we're moving forward with action, and we're still open for ideas, thoughts, and comments. Now, again, this is the second time that we have had this great group and dedicated group speak in front of us and give us their testimony and then leave immediately afterwards. And that to me, that bothers me. And Vivian, I thank you for sticking around and giving us your ear. We are committed still, and I know myself and the rest of these board members are very, very committed to listening and engaging in conversation and discourse that gets us to a mutual conclusion and outcome that continues to build an incredible, stable system. And to that end, we will continue to listen. But I can tell you that the frustration I feel right now is the frustration of having spent hours with leadership of Opal and Bus Riders Unite listening and then getting told that we don't listen. To that end, I take a deep offense to that. Now, that doesn't mean I will stop listening. It doesn't mean I will stop taking the meetings with Opal and Bus Riders Unite leadership. I will continue that dialogue and that discourse because it's something that's meaningful. But I could not leave this meeting today with this heavy on my heart, in the sense that this board, and I know they listen intently, I know they're very dedicated, and myself, I'm very dedicated. And to that end, I had to say something. And again, we will continue to move this forward. We will continue to work hard and listen. And again, I'm disappointed that there won't be anybody around to comment on the ordinance that we're going to have the first reading for. But again, I could not let this go without saying something in regards to the frustration I feel about the indictment that has just occurred in regards to this board not being sympathetic, empathetic, and listening to this very important dialogue and discourse.
Yeah, I want to second what Travis said, and actually, I'm glad he said it, because I'm even more upset. I wouldn't speak to anybody, you wouldn't expect me to sit here as a board member and speak to you in a foreign language and knowing you don't understand it. Sorry, if I spoke to you in French or Latin, that would be okay? We're trying to work, like Travis said, we're trying to work with you, and this isn't the way to do it. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Sale. Nice to see you today.
Well, isn't that a fine how do you do? Anyway, not to be another stick in the side. I'm here to merely, again, advocate for better bus driver training and better bus driver behavior. It's a renewal that we need to be reminded of every year. It's something that's happening nationwide, and our driver training program is now being used by over 500 companies nationwide and has been endorsed by numerous states and put in their libraries so that agencies in their state have the availability to it. This is what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And I think I've made huge, huge and monumental steps in bringing more attention to this problem and creating change. You as an agency, I've been impressed lately by many of the things that I've seen. Been unimpressed with other things as well, but in the words of Janitorin, are we ever going to please David Sale? Chances are very slim. But you will. I've been impressed on numerous occasions, and Neil and I have had background discussion, and keep moving forward. And please pay more attention to the safety, pay more attention to your driver training programs, your recertifications. The biggest issue I have is all the places that I've investigated in the last 4 years, the intersections where we've seen 15 or 20 bus drivers run a red light in the matter of an hour. It's still happening, and it's happening just as much in the same places that I complained about years ago. You know, and I don't know how many times I can bang my pans over my head and shake them down, but it just doesn't, you know, it's too slow. If I can do this in 4 years, I know you guys can do better, because you yourself, you're concerned, you pay attention, you listen, and there's nothing more important than that, because it affects the bottom line. It affects people's lives, not only the victims of the tragedies, but the drivers are victims as well, because they've been pushed into a position of making poor choices. So please, I know we can step it up. Harry and I are going to have some discussion. He promised me a call last month, and I know he's busy. We're going to get together. We're going to continue to hash this out in a more productive manner than lawsuits, and a more productive manner than yelling and screaming. We just need to get it done. And I appreciate your time.
We're doing all this, so this is important to understand. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yep.
My card's in the front, so if we need to have coffee, I'm open anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Guys.
All right. All right. Well, that will conclude the public forum, a portion of the board meeting today. With that, we're going to move on to our regular business meeting agenda, and we'll start with our board reports. The Committee on Accessible Transportation, Director Bethel, are you ready?
Good morning, Mr.
Good
President
morning.
and Board. This is a moment to take a second of a breath. But just to give you a couple of highlights from the CAT report and then moving on to the TAC report. Recommendations for appointment to the CAT have already been done by the nominating committee. They've been accepted by the general CAT and are being forwarded to the general manager for appointment. I would like to have a conversation with you about some of those appointments. We also had an update on the Southeast Service Enhancement Plan, reported the progress of that enhancement plan. Transit police update, as always. One of the issues that came up particularly has been the issue of dogs on transit. Nothing new to what the board has had a discussion and presentation about, but a couple of dogs were attacked on the transit, and of course transit explained that there are certain protocols in which must be followed. If a person says this is my service animal, that ends it. We can't go any further. However, CAT members would like to see some type of ID, something that says on the dog, you know, service animal, or even the cat that's riding as well, that is a therapy animal. Those are some concerns they have. We also looked at lift operations and ride connections update at that time. CAT annual luncheon is next month. And so hopefully some of you board members will have an opportunity to attend that. This will be the first CAT luncheon that I will miss since being the liaison due to being out of the country serving in missions at this time. Any questions on the CAT report?
Has the board gotten notice of that luncheon? Yeah. No, I don't. Why don't you, I'd like, could you send that out? Yes. Yeah, that'd be great. So that concludes his report on the CAT. Is there questions or comments for Dr. Bethel? All right. Dr. Bethel, you still have the floor. Would you like to talk a little bit about the accountability?
We will move on to the TAC, transparency and accountability group, committee that was set up, the AC. We met again last week. We reviewed the changes that have been suggested for the transparency and accountability page. I would invite the board, even though it's not totally complete, go on TriMet.org and find the transparency and accountability section and go take a look. I think you will be greatly pleased, as well as our general public. Our stats, again, since last month, we've had 700 unique views. And the way I understand those unique views is that the individual has gone directly into looking at the transparency page. Now, there are other views that are also where they access by going to the general page of TriMet.org and then doing something and then clicking and going into the transparency page. So it does show that it is being used. The hotline that was per the Secretary of State audit, we are still on track as soon as the budget is approved to have this line live by September 2015 so that employees will be able to report things anonymously. I think I got that right. That's about it on the TAC. We will meet, I think, a couple of more times during the summer, and then again, we'll be picking back up into fall. Right. Any questions or concerns, we'll take at this time.
No, thank you for your service, Dr. Bethel.
All right, thank you.
I think it is, I've looked at it, it is very informative, and I think it will, as people understand that tab is available, we'll be looking at things a lot more to be able to get information and get up to date on what's going on in TriMet. So again, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, let's move on to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. Director Zaragoza?
Yes, I have three things. First, we met, I think it was last week or the week before, we reviewed TriMet's youth fare proposal and voted to write a letter supporting the package from our chair of the committee, which you also received. The committee also agreed, as talked about this morning, that we should also consider the youth transit summit information that was provided, the MYC's proposals that were developed at the youth summit, which I think we also have. The committee, and I must say that there was a lot of great discussion around the youth pass and also extending that to other jurisdictions. And we also know that it's not just TriMet's decision to do that, that it also includes those jurisdictions, those public school districts as well. So again, I think it's really important that the public realize that it's not just only a TriMet decision, but the committee definitely supported that be looked at and go forward in the future. The committee also met with the TriMet Service Enhancement Team and provided feedback on the scheduled outreach. The committee will work closely with the policy and planning staff as they develop the public engagement plans for the service enhancement outreach. We also discussed the future for frequent service, and there was a lot of discussion around that, around specific bus lines, and those were the 71 and the 20 that are high because of the high numbers of using those buses. Would really like to engage in that conversation to see what could be done with that, especially with our dependent riders that use those two buses. Any questions on that? Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. With that, let's move on to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee. Director Prosser.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. Apparently my electric personality kind of plays havoc with my mic, so I'll try to talk fast. The Metro Policy Advisory Committee and the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation have been working through the Climate Smart Communities project. This is a project mandated by the state for all communities within the state to come up with a strategy and policies on how each of our areas can meet our carbon goals set by the state legislature. MPAC, Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee, and JPAC have had a joint meeting. It was several weeks ago, a chance for both bodies to get together and discuss. They kind of took the temperature of the group in terms of more specific strategies. We have another joint meeting between the two bodies coming up on Friday, a half-day meeting up at the World Forestry Center, and we'll try to take that the next step and further refine the approach so that staff can work through June, and towards the end of the summer, early fall, we ought to be seeing a recommended approach coming out of the two bodies. So we're moving forward on that. And that takes care of MPAC.
Right, want to move on to Finance and Audit Committee?
Yeah, Joe?
Yep. Okay. I guess not.
Neil, question for you. Who attends these meetings at JPAC for TriMet?
So I'm trying to represent the JPAC.
Okay.
Craig is the representative to MPAC.
Right.
And obviously, we're both well-staffed with our planning and policy.
True
staff.
statement.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Director Prosser, maybe you could move on to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay, Finance and Audit Committee. The Finance and Audit Committee itself, we haven't had been terribly active in the last couple of weeks. Staff has been moving forward on finalizing the budget, which is before us today for final adoption. We'll do want to point out that the subcommittee working on the strategic finance plan, Board Member Stovall and myself, are having a meeting tomorrow morning. We've invited several stakeholder groups to come and sit down with us and talk about our draft strategic finance plan. We hope to gather their thoughts and issues, concerns, and with the idea that that will lead us into, we have a second session, June 11th, and then end of June, first part of July, we can make any necessary tweaks and adjustments to the draft plan that we currently have, and which, as the board knows, we did use the principles as guidelines in the development of this year's budget, and hopefully to bring a final strategic finance plan back to this board at our business meeting at the end of July. So we're moving forward. I'm looking forward to the meeting tomorrow and hear what we get from those groups that are appearing tomorrow. And as I say, a second set we'll hear from on June 11th.
So the meeting tomorrow is on my schedule for tomorrow afternoon, is that correct?
Sorry.
Just making sure.
One of us will be there in the morning, one will be there in the afternoon.
Wow.
Got it covered.
Thank you for your effort and time on this one. This is going to be very valuable, I think, for us as we move forward. I wanted to just take one moment, if the board will allow me. I think, as this board knows, our general manager's contract began in July of 2010 with a 4-year term, and I just want to make sure you and anybody in the audience or anybody viewing this understands that term's about up. I also wanted to report that we're beginning a process to review the general manager's performance over the past year and also take a look at the future and moving forward. What I really want to make clear is both the board and the general manager are committed to making this a very public and open and transparent process, but also one that's thoughtful, thorough, and professional. One important element of the process is for the board to better understand the market. I think we want to make sure we know where we are and salaries. And for that, we also have hired an independent consultant, Milliman and Associates, to provide us a market analysis. And to ensure a timely and thorough review, I'm asking, I think as you know, the Finance and Audit Committee to take the responsibility to coordinate all of the activities of this review and contract process with the committee and also with the rest of the board. So we're going to have some discussions on that. And this process is just in the early stages and is likely to go into the summer due to board schedules for actually getting this to the board and for a public discussion. A key part of this process will be to provide you and the public with regular updates on the process. So I wanted to give this update just to let you know where we are. With that, I think I would just say, are there any questions or concerns? I think you're aware of the general process, but there's much more to come, and we'll try to keep everybody involved and get everybody's input as we move forward. I just wanted to make sure you, as I said, and everybody else that might be looking in on this meeting is aware of what's going on. So any comments or questions from the board? No? Okay. Well, with that then, we're going to move right into the general manager's reports. Mr. General Manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, I guess my first response is time does fly by. But thank you for that. And I did want to just spend a couple minutes responding to a couple of the comments that you heard during the public forum. One is related to the Swan Island work. We have had a long and I think very productive relationship with the Swan Island TMA over a long period of time. And as you heard, there are some sort of short-term service improvements that we have underway. And again, our 72 bus provides great connections there. But we also know that the island is continuing to grow and that space is much more valuable in terms of providing employment space rather than parking space, and that our goal actually is to meet the obligations and the hopes and dreams of the industrial tenants down there. The other opportunity, in addition to our ongoing work with the TMA, is that we have recently kicked off the last piece of geography associated with our service enhancement plans, which is the central and north area. And so that is another opportunity to begin to look at what the long-term vision for longer-term, being 5 to 10-year vision for bus service and other improvements to service within that whole geographic area that includes Swan Island, and be into sort of how to tie all of that together. So that would be another opportunity over the next year as we work with all the stakeholders on that. Regarding the Portland-Milwaukee bus service plan, we have had one round of community outreach and a series of meetings associated with that. That was getting a lot of ideas and opinions. And we actually hope to begin the second round where we actually go back with some ideas that attempt to respond to those comments that we heard. And that should start by about the end of June, as we're hoping. And again, our goal, we still have some time, September 2015. But I would note that the comments you heard from the Sellwood Moreland neighborhood have definitely registered, and we're looking for ways to be as responsive as we can on all of that. As you're well aware, in all of these things, we've got the the issues and the connections that people want to see, and we've also got budget issues. So we're trying to kind of walk that tightrope as we move toward the opening of the project. But I think we have the opportunity to have a very responsive local bus service plan in September 2015. And we'll certainly bring that plan to you both at its initial stage and as it begins to finalize with additional rounds of public review over a period of time here. Again, our schedule really for adopting that would not really be until sort of this time next year. Now, ideally, perhaps a little bit ahead of that, given the magnitude of change that we have to prepare for. So those are a couple just notes related to the public forum. I also wanted to provide you an update. Yes.
Other questions from the board? I guess I just had maybe a couple. The first one, though, is I assume the ramps that they're talking about at the station are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I think there is a question about how to provide bus service into that station, which is because of the, if you will, interchange with McLaughlin and Tacoma is both physically a little bit removed from where the roadway is. So but there's some good solutions, I think, that we have in mind with that. So again, staff is working on how to facilitate all of that and beginning to balance it with the budget over as we move ahead.
On Swan, excuse me, on Swan Island, on this construction, once that gets going, you're cognizant, I don't know if everybody else is, but we usually start earlier in the morning.
Right.
So if you have
I'll look into that. I believe our service actually does start pretty early because it now provides, it's sensitive to the shift work, which is oftentimes a little bit early on the island as well. So, but that's a good thing to double check. We'll do that.
And the other question I had is, you maybe covered on when we get to the ordinance, but I don't believe, unless I missed something, that I saw anything from Opal or their youth committee in terms of comments on the youth pass program, the reduction of fares.
I'm checking with the board recording secretary.
So
No. I would say that we did have a number of staff attend the Multnomah County Youth Summit that was described, and I have seen a PDF version of the notes from that, including we had, for example, public safety people there as well as people dealing with the fare issue and equity issue. So we can certainly forward that to the board. But they're very wide-ranging recommendations that include issues of enforcement and not all related to the ordinance, but obviously on that topic as well. Yep.
Thank you.
We'll get that to you.
Please proceed. I'm sorry.
I did want to give you a quick update on where we are with our labor contract. As we talked to you at your last briefing, we have had 37 negotiation sessions and 2 sessions with the state mediator, and so far no progress. Frankly, even difficult to bring up the topics of benefits and wages. So we, as we informed you earlier, did use the process to try to move it along and declared impasse. And as you recall, the next step from that was a week after that. Final offers were due to the Employment Relations Board and to be filed with them. And the those offers were timely filed. We're reviewing those offers right now. We'll be providing the board here in the next week or so a summary of the issues that come to the forefront associated with comparing those 2 issues. I'd also note that with the Employment Relations Board has begun by letter the interest arbitration process, letter of May 23rd, and that next step on that process is actually for them to send us, both ATU and TriMet, a list of 7 arbitrators, and we have a schedule to either agree on one or to begin a striking process where one name remains. We've also, by the way, and wanted to just emphasize this point, recognize, as we've said over and over again, the best result would be a negotiated outcome where we can really tailor our proposals to the issues that the union sees. And certainly our negotiating sessions helped us with that, but still the best outcome is negotiated. And we proposed 2 additional mediation dates to the ATU. So far, they meet the mediator schedule, but we have not heard from the ATU whether they will be able to make those dates. It's June 12th and 24th, just FYI. I'd also note that the ATU filed an unfair labor practice against TriMet, charging that the agency bargained in bad faith. And certainly we're looking at with great detail, and our legal staff is beginning to review that from that perspective. But we view that ULP, frankly, as a diversionary tactic and a series of false claims. Certainly the number of sessions, the number of mediation sessions, and the volume of information we've responded to in terms of information requests from the union is above and beyond. So we believe we bargained, met every standard, and then some related to bargaining in good faith. So, we sort of see this at the core is that this ULP is really intended to delay the arbitration. I would also just note that in reviewing the final offer from the ATU, we see a number of very troubling issues in that as well. So again, we're reviewing that this week and deciding, and we'll be in touch with you related to the findings of that review, what our next steps associated with that should be. Just wanted to, does this sound fairly familiar in terms of the process that we went through the last time for those of you who were on the board at that point? I'd be happy to answer any questions, or certainly bring Randy up, who's the expert of going through this right now.
I guess I just ask on the troubling issues. Are these new issues or issues that have been brought to the table before?
These are not entirely new, but I'll give you just one example, which is there's a proposal that that if operators are assigned a certain bus style, that their turns, they would not be able to make left turns. That was an issue that was removed from the bargaining table by the ATU previously, and so should not, in our view, have been carried forward to final. So it's those sort of generally not new issues, but procedurally, how do you advance the issues into the arbitration?
All right. Thank you. We'll look forward to some further updates on that. Yep.
Would you restate what you just said, Neil? Please.
So the ATU, in their initial proposals to us, did provide for the 3,000, 3,100 series buses, which are the newer Gillig buses, that they would not, the proposal was a work rule that operators would not make a left turn in those buses. And again, that was discussed during our negotiation sessions, and we saw that proposal removed from the table. And we're surprised to see it again in the final offer. But I don't mean to dwell on that issue particularly, but it does indicate that there are an example of some of the procedural issues we have.
Neil.
So if I can move on to a very happy note, which is last week we held our Operators of the Year ceremony, and we will bring our Operators of the Year to the board at their next meeting and ask you to adopt a resolution sort of acknowledging their excellence in the work that they do. Again, these are selected by their peers, but after meeting certain standards of customer service and attendance and on-time performance and safety. So all of those criteria go into it, and we have some really outstanding people to bring to you at your June 11th meeting. But I also want to note at the same ceremony, we acknowledged and celebrated a number of other accomplishments. The one that I really wanted to note was that we had 796 TriMet operators earn a National Safety Council Safe Driving Award in the last year. And that's great. That's a great number. But even beyond that, we had 6 operators who were inducted into what we call our Million Mile Club. And that means essentially when you line it out, 29 years of safe driving. So phenomenal accomplishments by some of our workforce, and we just wanted to celebrate that in every way we can, and I wanted to share that with you. And finally, I just wanted to note that last week we did have one of our annual if you will, checkups by the FTA, our quarterly meeting, and I'm happy to report it went very well. Full briefing, of course, on the Portland-Milwaukee project, which is one of their major investments, and updates on our other issues, preventive maintenance of the rail system, state of good repair, and no issues or follow-up actions were noted. So that is always a good thing. And so, Mr. President, that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you.
Just a quick statement. Last Monday and Tuesday mornings, I was out at the foot of the Hawthorne Bridge on the east side, wearing one of my other hats, waving signs and stuff. I was just really impressed about the drivers, because that's having to weave in and out of the traffic,
Yes.
weave in and out of the bicyclist, weaving out, watching out for guys like me. I was really impressed.
And as you saw, there's a large number of buses on that bridge in that corridor.
You could kind of walk, yes, you could hop from one to the other almost.
Moving sidewalk of
busy.
buses. I would note,
And there are people on the other side of the street,
Yep.
on the bridge itself, so.
just to that point, I would also note that we continue to have conversations with our colleagues at the city. That is the stretch of Hawthorne where it is the proverbial 12 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack in terms of trying to squeeze so much activity into that inner Hawthorne stretch. And we continue to really want to see a little more room on those lanes for our bus operators. We make it very hard with that current alignment.
Amen.
We're going to introduce Harry.
Yes. So Mr. Saporta will come up and actually give you an update on one of the key recommendations that came out of the Safety Task Force that, we formed in 2010 that reviewed our safety program, and that was something called the Request for Safety Assessment. And again, Harry.
Good morning, President Warner and board members. What I'd like to do this morning is provide you with a brief overview of what is known as the RSA process, which is the Request for Safety Assessment. And as Neil noted, the General Manager Safety and Service Excellence Task Force noted at that time that the process in place then was not effective in allowing operators and other employees to report safety concerns. There was a process in place. It was known as the yellow card process, which was a paper process, but for whatever reason, those issues that may have been raised at the time were getting lost. So the task force recommended that a new process be looked at and put in place. And such a process was then put in place in March of 2011. And as Neil said, time does fly. And then later in that year, it was expanded from the operators to all employees within TriMet. And essentially, this process was a means to allow employees to clearly define a safety concern that they may have and then to report it. But equally important, it was also a way that we would then provide feedback to the employees as to specifically what was being done. As you recall, the state did an audit of various operations within TriMet, and one of those was the number of safety processes. And what the state found was that there really was a need to improve the RSA process. I want to go back just for a moment and explain also that as part of the RSA process, we would solicit feedback from employees as to how well they perceive the process working. Did it meet their particular need? And then based upon that, we would make improvement. But what the state audit found was that there was still another need to better communicate the purpose and effectiveness of the RSA process to all employees, and that there was still some confusion with that old yellow card process. And at times, employees were even reluctant to express a concern because they felt that their concerns were not being addressed. So just for a moment, what I'd like to do is explain what is the RSA process, and essentially there are 5 steps to it. It is a web-based process. We've eliminated the paper because we felt that paper does get lost, and that was one of the issues with the yellow card process. And it allows for an employee to enter the concern onto a website. The problem with that is not all employees are computer literate, and they may not necessarily have access to a computer either. So that was an issue that we found. Also, this allows us as the safety department to review the concern. We meet monthly to go over each one of the RSAs that are submitted, and we coordinate all of this with other staff, principally with the operations staff, to address the particular concerns. The findings of that review are noted and then transmitted back to the employee, and appropriate action is taken. Or if no action was being taken, an explanation as to why that was the case. Nevertheless, we knew that from the audit that there was a need for improvement. So we actually met with every single safety committee within TriMet and asked the basic question of how do we better communicate with you, the safety committee? How do we communicate with the frontline employee better? And how do we measure if the communication is successful? So we work closely with our communications staff to find answers to these particular questions. And what we found was that that there was a need to better communicate with the safety committees themselves, that often we were not bringing the specific RSAs to the committees, and we were now going to do that because gaining their insight and guidance was important to improving the RSA process and understanding the safety concerns that were raised as well. To help formulate the exact process, we also developed a standard operating procedure, and that was not an exercise in bureaucracy, but it is one of the means of communicating with our workforce as to what is the specific process. So it is a requirement that frontline employees be familiar with SOPs in general, and this is one communication tool. So again, it wasn't to be bureaucratic about this, but rather this was another means of communication. The other thing that we found was we were not communicating with the initiators as frequently as we had thought we were. So rather than providing periodic updates, we formalized the process in providing much more specific timelines for when we would provide the feedback with the initiator. At times, the whole process takes several weeks and perhaps even months, depending upon what the issue is, because we may have to coordinate with a local jurisdiction. Some of the safety concerns raised are really beyond the control of TriMet and really fall into the realm of the local jurisdiction. The other finding was that there is a link that is posted on our homepage in the intranet, and that link, however, was buried under all types of other communication. So we made it much more prominent, and if you note on the lead slide, I have it here, it says RSA, and we actually use this icon to help identify where on the web page the request for safety assessment can be found. That change alone resulted in a 60% increase in RSAs. So we found that things get buried, are not easily identified, and people don't tend to hunt for them. So we wanted to make it much more prominent. We also promoted the concept through the RSA process through the employee newsletter. We are also looking at an alternate means of communicating their safety concern. And one of those means is a telephone hotline that they literally can call in the safety concern, and a safety staff member would then make the notation and enter the issue into the electronic system for them. And then obviously they can approach their supervisor or manager and make the request for safety assessment as well. And that manager would then help them input the required information. One of the things that is happening is that we are adding the RSA process to the new employee orientation. So when a new operator comes on board, this is going to be made known to them, or if a maintenance employee comes on board, this is also going to be made known to them. They're not going to have to hunt for it and learn of what is that process. And another piece that's currently under development is developing a search tool. Right now it's rather cumbersome. It's cumbersome for the safety staff to use it. That will allow an employee to go in and to search their specific request and what is the specific status. This is in addition to receiving that written communication as to what the status is. It also allows other employees to learn of what other safety concerns have been raised, and we will be posting these, a list of the RSAs that have been submitted in each of the operator report areas and in the maintenance areas. So these are just some of the improvements that we're making to the process. The last slide shows we've created this dashboard. This dashboard also can be found on the website, but if you look at 2014, the slide only shows it through March. In April, we received 21 requests for safety assessments and closed out 29 for a year-to-date total of 66 received and 63 closed. So we're beginning to see more and more RSAs submitted, and we're attempting to address each and one of those and close them out quickly. Sometimes that becomes a bit of a challenge. So that's just a brief overview of the RSA process, and I don't know if anyone has any particular questions.
Just really quick, it's impressive that we've seen a 60% increase in the number that has been brought to us. I mean, that's encouraging by the fact that, as you referenced, giving them the opportunity to have an easier way of finding the ability or the opportunity to report that makes it, much more, much easier to actually present. The question to that component is, are we adding additional resources, or have we added additional resources to respond to all of the additional RSAs that are coming through?
Short answer is no.
So
but it's not just safety staff working on these items. So if it's something that needs to be reviewed by the field operations staff, the RSA is sent to them, and they take the lead in addressing that particular issue. But one of the things that always will happen, and always does happen, is that safety staff reviews the initial decision that's made by that reviewer. And it's the safety staff that have the ultimate decision-making as to the course of action. And in some cases, we send it back and say, this isn't good enough. Find another way to make it better. So that does happen.
And is there, I know this is really conjecture, but is there the belief that we're going to see, now that we've made this more accessible, we're going to see a kind of a blip or a bolus in the numbers that are being reported, and then we may see a subsequent decline? I mean, again, that's conjecture, but it's just a kind
Actually,
of a thought.
that is exactly what we saw when the process was initially initiated.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a spike. Generally, we also see spikes whenever there is a new, what we call sign-up, when there are operators that are operating on lines that they previously have not driven on.
Mm-hmm.
They see issues that others maybe became more comfortable with, and so we'll go out and reevaluate that. Sometimes it just becomes more, it is becoming more comfortable with your new operating environment. But nevertheless, we still make those reviews, and we provide the feedback to the operators. I would say the vast majority of the issues submitted are from operators. That's not to say that others don't, but the vast majority are from bus operators. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Good. Before you leave, though, I do want to publicly thank you and the Public Affairs staff for working with the Transportation Safety Administration to be able to get reports on our operations and maintenance of our surveillance cameras and other things to KATU so they could understand what was going on. I was a little disappointed in KATU and their intimation in the stories that the system might be unsafe. So I was very pleased that you were able to get that information. Remind me what percentage of our cameras are operational at this time on a regular basis?
So the fixed system is about 99%, and the on the mobile system, it's around 94, 96%. We've had many vendors come to us and say this is battle-proven hardware, and I said, you don't understand. It's rough out there, and that's called a bus. The bus just creates enormous vibration that even the battle-proven equipment can't stand up to. So it's a harsh environment.
Well, those are good statistics for my estimation in terms of because I think what they were alleging in their, or trying to intimate in their stories was that other districts had 60% operational, 40%, and we were hiding something. That really bothered me, and so thank you for working to get that information out to them. I don't suspect we'll see a story that indicates that they were in error in terms of or they jumped the gun in terms of working on this, but I just wanted to acknowledge that work because I know it wasn't pleasant when it was going on.
And you'll have an opportunity to see what our next iteration is going to look like. We're hoping to issue an RFP soon and then make a selection with a vendor, and we're looking at making further improvements.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Well, let's move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. And for anybody watching this, the items that are on our consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of the consent agenda for formal action. I will point out there are 4 items on the agenda. The first is a resolution directing that ordinances to be read by title only, just for you, Madam Council. And the second one is approval of our board meeting minutes for April 23rd, 2014. And then a resolution 14-0525 authorizing a contract with Carson Oil for the purchase of a card lock commercial fueling station services. And then finally a resolution 14-05-26 authorizing a contract with Portland Mall Management for the cleaning, maintenance, and security of the Portland Transit Mall and Morrison Street, Yamhill Street, and First Avenue. So again, that's the consent agenda. Is there any item that the board would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing then, is there a motion then to approve the consent agenda as presented? So moved. Have a motion? Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, with that, then I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, let's move on to the resolutions. The first resolution is a very important one. It's a resolution 14-05-27, which is adopting the fiscal year 2014-2015 annual budget and appropriating funds. Mr. General Manager, I suspect you have a good report for us, and maybe can update us on some of the comments we may have received and how you believe we should respond.
Absolutely, Mr. Board President, members of the board. Again, thank you for consideration of this budget resolution. As Board Member Prosser noted, has been subject to a great deal of review as by the full board, as well as the Finance and Audit Committee and the General Manager's Budget Task Force over the last few months. I'd first of all say that this budget really continues what I would say is the hard work to stabilize the financial health of the agency. But because of some of the steps we've taken in the past, we're in the position that we can actually restore and add service and improve the quality of the service that we want to offer our customers. It also responds to the investments that were recommended by the Secretary of State's audit report. And I'd also note that it's consistent with the board's fund balance policy, its pension funding policies that you've previously adopted over the last couple of months. And it was developed in general conformance with the board's draft policies on the strategic financial plan as well. And I would just note that, just as a reminder, that the budget was developed based on the long-term forecast. Our budgets are always a snapshot in a long-term forecast because what we do has to be repeated every year into the future. And that long-term forecast does presume that we'll have some success related to our cost structure reform that we proposed with the ATU. So again, just to recap the process, we launched the budgeting process internally to the agency in early January. We kicked off the General Manager's Budget Task Force at about the same time. We had a March briefing where we actually released to you the draft budget and also released to the public for comment. Also at the March briefing, the General Manager's Budget Task Force chair provided a report to you on their findings and observations about the budget. At your March business meeting, you actually approved the budget to be forwarded to the Multnomah County Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. And you recall in April, we had a very informative public hearing with them where you and staff responded to, I think, some really excellent questions that were asked by the TSCC board members themselves. I'd also just note, by the way, at the TSCC that they continue to look at this budget as a model budget. I think one of the reasons that they do that and they like this budget is we are a single-purpose district, and it makes it a little more straightforward. And our budget is, as these public budgets go, relatively straightforward. I'd also note that at your briefing a couple of weeks ago, Dave Oxear went through some of the last-minute true-ups that we were proposing in this budget that is actually embedded in the resolution that's before you. Those mainly had some additional costs associated with improving our maintenance program on the rail side, personnel staff, and some one-time only costs related to IT. And then also a change that just related to potential refinancing to save some money of some bonds that were, again, more of an accounting measure than a real budgetary issue. So here we are today, and I think as this should be, this is a very important decision for the board. This has been a long process and a very studied one, and I've appreciated the board's question involvement along the way. Just to note, the highlights, our operating budget is $494.3 million. On the revenue side, we base the budget on the rebounding economy on the payroll tax. And we believe that the most recent results we've seen from the payroll tax do support the projections going forward. But again, we'll always be tied to the performance of the payroll tax as an agency. We've programmed flat federal operating assistance in terms of the federal funds that come to TriMet. As our lobbyist in D.C. will say, flat is the new up in Washington, D.C. So that's good news. Again, no changes to the adult fare. Matter of fact, no fare increase at all, and some switch that we'll talk about in terms of funding related to the youth fare and the Portland Public School program that's at issue in the last ordinance that is on your agenda here today. Again, I just wanted to mention the labor contract issue again, and to emphasize that we're not inflexible. We have certain financial stability criteria that we need to meet, and there's lots of ways to meet that. And we're happy to continue to work with the ATU to reach that outcome, recognizing, again, that the best outcome would be a negotiated outcome. I'd also just note that this budget has, I think, a lot of good news for our customers, for our riders. We have $7.1 million in new service being added. That's an investment in both frequent service and in the investments to improve service on another 11 bus lines, and that deals with overcrowding and schedule reliability. We're continuing our program of accelerated bus replacement, 64 new buses programmed for fiscal year 15. That keeps us on our track of being at an average bus age of 8 years by in 2016, which has been our long-term goal. I'd also note that we've got some, I think, really exciting state of good repair projects overall that will help to improve the reliability of the MAX system overall. One sort of immediate for customer service is the GPS system being extended to the MAX to better track our trains and provide better information to our customers. We've talked about the electronic fare system and that fare system replacement. This budget supports the ongoing steps associated with that. As you know, a long multi-year program. And we have a number of customer facility improvements include, for example, the Washington Park Station, which is looking a little tired in some areas. I would also note that the budget includes the initial funding for an additional DMU for the West system. And you did receive a comment related to this, and I just wanted to note that the budget provides the authority to do that, budget authority to do that. It doesn't provide the contract authority to do that. So we will obviously be coming back to you if we're successful in negotiating as a good option with the manufacturer with a contract action, and that would be, I think, the appropriate time for you really to look into that. But again, that budget authority is in the budget to give you the flexibility to decide that either way at a future time. So the only other, I just also note related to Harry's last presentation, there are a number of safety and security improvements that we've included in the budget as well. Continuing the safety certification program for the operators and our supervisors and our trainers. We have, again, improvements to the West positive train control. Those are federally required, but nonetheless positive improvements. As Harry noted, improvements to our CCTV technology on trains and buses. So as state-of-the-art as we try to be in 1 year, a few years later, we need to catch up, and that's where we are with all of that. In addition, we have a number of pedestrian improvements, particularly focused on areas where we're seeing a great deal of growth around the rail alignment. And two particular areas, 7th and Holiday, around the Convention Center Hotel, and around Arenco is a third area, and where we're seeing dramatic changes in land use, and we want to make sure that our pedestrian facilities really are aligned with the new flows that will continue with that increased development. I'd also just note that, as we've discussed before, this includes the ability for about a 3% non-union raise, and any union raise would be what would be called for in our ATU contract. To your comments, Mr. Board President, we did hear from the public. We had about 50 comments through our customer service department. And I would say that the reaction has generally been quite positive, particularly around the service, crowding, and schedule reliability topics. We had a number of suggestions for specific improvements on lines. Those included most frequently the Green Line MAX service, the 12, the 35, the 44, the 51 in areas around Lake Oswego. We're looking at that, but what we also do is look at our own statistics of overcrowding and schedule reliability that we have very good information on as we program the specific improvements. We also, there was a great deal of public support for more maintenance focus related to the MAX reliability issues. So that hit a resonance with a number of the commenters. But we also, on the flip side, saw some negative comments associated with additional funding for the West DMU or any light rail improvements. There was that side of people viewing that as a trade-off with the bus system. And again, our view to that is that it's a system that needs to work together. So those are the process and highlights of this year's budget. It's a little bit longer report than I usually get, but it's a very important topic, and certainly willing to address any questions and bring up the experts if you have them.
Neil, have we heard from the business groups within our jurisdiction?
We keep in touch very closely. Matter of fact, I did a presentation to the PBA board about this just a couple of weeks ago. I'm meeting with the Clackamas County Business Association here before very long. So we keep in regular contact, but we haven't heard any specific comments on this budget from any business organization that I'm aware of.
Have we heard anything about the service improvements?
Yes. So I would say that the sort of key comment that I hear from business community would be continue to focus on your long-term financial sustainability, number one, and on service, make sure we're thinking about the job end of the trips and beginning and strengthening service to employment zones within the region. That's a consistent thread that we've heard.
Thanks.
If I might,
Please.
follow up to, just for Director Esmond's information, as part of the strategic finance plan process that we're starting tomorrow in terms of getting invited testimony, we have invited the Clackamas County Business Association, the West Side Economic Alliance. I believe, I'm looking at Sandy, we invited Portland Business Alliance, but they are unable to come. So we will be hearing from them in that regard. And also, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Paul Schlesinger, sitting over here, hiding in the extreme edge over here, member of the Budget Task Force, but also the Budget Task Force does include Paul's downtown business property owner, business owner, Portland Business Alliance. So that group also has good representation from the business community, as well as other interest groups and service groups.
In the interest of reaching out, have we reached out to neighborhood groups to get come, if they want to weigh in? Or?
So we have been doing that more in the context of the service enhancement plans than in the specific budget action. Yeah.
All right. Good. Thank you.
Rosa, do you have any questions? Director Stovall? I guess I just want to make sure, so John Charles obviously said we should just stop West service entirely and not put any money in DMU. I'm not prepared to go there. But what your point is we have the authorization to purchase the DMU units to expand West service, and that'll be coming back to us, and we'll be able to have some further discussion on that
Absolutely.
before we put the money. So
Absolutely.
That's clear. And then the other one, which I thought was, I just want to make sure everybody understands that he brought this up. I think he's saying we should not assume service increases based on our initial offer to the union, because he believes there's risk that we may lose in the arbitration if that's where it gets down to, and we ought to. I think he says we don't want to cut service after that happens. I guess I just point out that I think this board is well aware of the risk with this, and I think our desire and what we hear from folks is to begin to provide additional service out there on the ground. And so I think this is the right thing to do. And frankly, if arbitration is not in our favor, then I think there's a direct link in terms of cause and effect between the settlement and our service, and we need to make that clear when we make those choices. So I just want to make sure that we address his issues head on as we move forward in this budget, because they are thoughtful comments. Don't necessarily agree with them, but they are thoughtful. So,
Very good.
Any other comments or questions on the budget? So then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 14-05-27? Which, all right, I hear a motion. I hear a second. Is there any further discussion on the budget? Hearing none, then I will call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-05-27, which is adopting the fiscal year 2014-2015 annual budget and appropriated funds, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, I will note that Director Esmond is not in the room right at the moment, and so it is unanimous, but I think we don't need to have his vote on this unless I'll ask him if he wants to cast a vote in opposition or abstain for some reason before, and if we do, we'll go back to that, okay? All right. Then moving on, Resolution 14-05-28, which is authorizing a transfer of appropriated funds within the fiscal year 13-14 general funds budget, which is a budget we're in this year. Mr. General Manager?
Right, Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is a true-up resolution, which is a traditional effort that you see at the end of each fiscal year as we look at our various actions and then come to you with any recommendation to true up the current budget. And there were two actions that we thought were important to record in the actual final budget for the year. One is that in December you approved a fund transfer. Again, that was revenue neutral to TriMet, but allowed ODOT to provide some federal funds to us and us to provide non-federal funds to ODOT that allowed them to provide operating assistance to the Amtrak service that we all know and love as the Cascade service. And this, we're helping, frankly, our state partners out of a bit of a jam where it's very hard for them to put direct highway-related revenue sources into the operation of the Amtrak system. So there is that element of the true-up. And then the second is a transfer of $200,000 to the legal division, which was necessary associated with what we called the information governance process, that program that you've been previously briefed on, which is our attempt to improve the control of documents throughout the agency. And the initial steps and effort on that were led by the legal division and will continue to be led by the legal division as we move forward. So those are really just the two issues that caused us to bring this resolution before you. And I can certainly answer any questions, but I know Dave and others are here as well, should you have them.
Questions? I guess I was just curious why we had it in the public affairs budget.
Well, I think at the outset, we may not have really defined the project very well.
Okay.
And so it defined itself to be, to a very large extent, responding to some of the legal discovery challenges that we had that were noted throughout the year. Again, this was, I think, picked up by the Secretary of State's audit, not that we start something new, but that we really follow through on this effort that we had initiated earlier.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right then. Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, there in a motion to approve resolution 14-05-28.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 14-05-28, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. And the final resolution then is resolution 14-05-29, which says to the Board of Directors acting in its capacity as TriMet's contract review board, exempting from public competitive bidding requirements a contract for the construction manager / general manager contract, which are known as CMGC, services for the e-fare infrastructure installation project. Mr. General Manager.
The Board President, members of the Board, just to be very clear about what this transaction is, it really allows us to begin a procurement that would be a best value procurement that would allow us to select a contractor for this electronic fare implementation effort based on not just price, but price as well as schedule performance, cost control, attention to safety, workmanship quality, and really important, I know, to the board is DBE and workforce diversity issues. If we were not to approve this, if you were not to approve this resolution, then we would be required to bid this as a low bid sort of contract where price is the sole determinant. In this case, we think that this is incredibly important to consider these other criteria in the selection of the criteria of the contractor. Primarily, this will be done while we are operating, and it also means that we've got to be very careful about access to and from our platforms as this work is being done. And again, the effectiveness of the CMGC process is that it really allows the contractor to be a part of the team as the work is designed and scheduled and planned, so that we can really minimize the impact to our customers as this work is ongoing. I would also tell you that from our experience, we get far better responsiveness on the criteria that I've listed before associated with the CMG contractors, and we also have generally a very good price and competitive process associated with price. Price is still part of the process, but it is not the sole determinant if you approve this. And again, you're not approving the contractor contract at this point. You're approving the rules of the game that we will use to procure the contractor. And in this case, the rules would be a best value procurement that allows consideration of these additional criteria. We had a public hearing on this pursuant to state law. No comments were received on that. And the findings associated with this change in procurement policy for this contract are also attached to the resolution. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any question or refer them to Dan and others.
Good report. Yes.
I have no problem with approving this, my question really relates to the project overall. Could you address just a little bit how this installation project will be coordinated with ongoing station improvement efforts?
Yes.
Like Renew the Blue, like Sunset Transit Center, like the Zoo Stop? How are they going to be coordinated, or are we going to do some stuff that we're going to have to tear up later?
So there will be a great effort to do that coordination. And I might note that that's already started. For example, on the Portland-Milwaukee projects, we've already started the runs with the conduits to the right place to be able to accommodate that. So we've been trying to think of that. I would also note that as we do the Renew the Blue station work, we'll incorporate this into it. Now, some of those, for example, at Washington Park Station, the validators will be up top, I suspect, as opposed to down below. So depending upon where the work is, there still may be two series of construction, but we'll try to minimize it. And again, I think that's one of the great advantages of this form of contracting, is we have the ability to be a little bit flexible about signing the work so that we are in an area the minimum number of times, hopefully just once.
Mr. President? So a few questions there. In looking, Mr. General Manager, as we move back to a diagram that's, I think, about the third page in, are all of the validators going to be out in the open? I'm just thinking about particularly the issue of this liquid sunshine that we get quite often. Secondly, in terms of persons with disability who may be in wheelchairs or on other assistive devices, having to be out in the elements to even validate, will there be any consideration of these validators being put closer to, maybe under the underhang of some of the shelters, or?
So let me just sort of describe the trade-offs that we look at in that. And I would probably preface my remarks to say that there's not one solution that fits every platform uniquely, perfectly. So I think what we'll have to be is very sensitive as we design this to the unique circumstances of the platform. But the advantage of moving them outboard near the entries to the platform is that then we're in a position to enforce fares on the platform itself. Now, that's not possible everywhere. So, for example, in sidewalk areas like the picture that's shown here, your comment may be very absolutely right on, where maybe we can move it under a cover of some sort. But if we're trying to create a fare zone on a platform that's in the middle of the street so that we can enforce fares on the platform, which is part of our security protocols, then we'd want to move them to the entry points. I would note that on some of the new stations we're building, for example, the Portland-Milwaukee projects, we are building an overhang at the entry that will house entry point to the platform that will house both the ticket machine as well as the validator. So that would be our standard moving forward. But we're going to have to be sensitive to the environment at each station and what we can accomplish. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and thank you. Secondly, in dealing with those validators, will they be tested in terms of moisture? Moisture is one of the most dangerous things we have to any electronic type of mechanism, and just concerned about how much upkeep and maintenance will have to be on these if they're constantly exposed to the weather, or if there's going to be some type of something that is over the validator itself that deflects the water and the moisture.
So there will be a very thorough testing program. What I can tell you, suffering from some water damage from last night myself, I know that I was sharing with, but I would share with you that the validators that are being manufactured right now are solid state devices, and so they're really quite quite sturdy in terms of how they respond to the elements, but we need to make sure, obviously, that those connections can be done that, as you described, with a high level of reliability. The other challenge, while not associated with the infrastructure piece, but is they've got to, as Harry noted, be battle tested associated with the with their position on the bus as well. So bus and rail vehicles potentially. So that's all part of the testing process as we move forward.
Okay. And finally, no problem, I think, in approving this as a CMGC type of program. However, I do want to go on record as stating that in dealing with this, I must refer back to my experience in dealing with INIT, that I do not want to see the repeat of what we had in INIT in terms of low MBE numbers, dealing with price, and not getting the other criteria up. And as I said to INIT, as you know, the vote went in their favor, I hope you prove me wrong. I want to be very cautious, and cautious the department at this time as you began to move forward to look for a contractor. Be stringent, be tough, be strong, to bring back something that is going to be representative and not representing the same that I saw within it. I cannot deal with another one of those types of proposals.
Message received. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right. All right. Thank you, then. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 14-05-20? Hear a motion?
Second.
Hear a second? Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to tag on with the good doctor here about, and I talked to Init before, after the last vote, everything we can do to do MBE, or not necessarily in the field, but even in the office, some kind of intern position, because this field is kind of specialized, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
And be good to get some people up and going. Thank you.
Good comment. And again, just for anybody watching this at home before we vote, I would just say that, again, if you read the title, it's just exempting from competitive bidding. I want to make it clear what we're doing is, in essence, putting a more comprehensive competitive process in place that doesn't just involve price, but involves a whole bunch of other things, many of which we're talking about now. So with that, then, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-05-29 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approved unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, well, let's move on to the one ordinance, our final agenda item of the day, which is ordinance number 335. What I'd like to do is ask our general counsel to read ordinance 335 by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Ordinance number 335, adopting youth fare changes and amending TriMet Code Chapter 19.
Mr. General Manager, may I could ask you to give us a report on this?
Board President and members of the board, we've had some preliminary discussions of this as the meeting has progressed, but I just wanted to just put this in context with you, which is this is a first reading of ordinance that would reduce youth fares and the youth pass price region-wide. And at your June 11th meeting, where it would be under consideration for adoption, we'll pair that with a resolution that would authorize the general manager to enter into a new agreement with Portland Public Schools and the city of Portland to continue the Portland Public Schools Youth Pass program. The final comment to make about that Youth Pass program, and a little bit more detail as we get into that, but that is being developed in a way that is generic. In other words, that program would be available to any school district that wanted to come to the table with us, with a partner, in the same way that the City of Portland and Portland Public Schools have. But in the meantime, we think that the reduction of the youth fare was very important. And this goes back to your retreat from last October, where we looked at fare policy and the relative prices that TriMet had compared to our peers in other areas. And I think one of the conclusions of that was that compared to many of our peers, our youth pricing was high. And that there was a desire on the part of the board to bring that down to essentially what would be the ADA level price, not at TriMet right now, but if you sort of did half the adult fare program of, which is the current adult fare is $250, bring it down to $125. And again, we reviewed these proposals with you at your May 14th briefing, both for the youth pass as well as the reductions in youth fares. And we also reviewed the transit equity analysis that was done related to this. And I wanted to just sort of note that that transit equity analysis, I think, showed some very important things. One thing that it showed is that the low-income youth is not a problem just of Multnomah County. It is a regional problem that really does begin to require a regional solution, which is why I think the action associated with a youth fare and pass program is very appropriate. And then the work that we'll need to do to sort of continue to develop partnerships like we have with the City of Portland and Portland Public Schools will need to begin in earnest upon approval of the program changes. I'd also just would note that there have been some other issues that have come up associated with this. For example, what is the category in our fare ordinance right now? A youth is anyone between 7 and 17. So one of the things we may want to look at in the future will be whether that's the right age category. But we chose not to change that at this point in time, just in terms of moving the ball forward as quickly as we can, understanding things as we know them now. I'd also note that the reduction, the youth fare will reduce fare revenue. The estimate for TriMet is that it will reduce our fare revenue by about $775,000 annually. And again, the timing of the second reading would be June 1st, and that would again be paired with a resolution authorizing the intergovernmental agreement with Portland Public Schools and the City of Portland for that Youth Pass program. I'd also note that the Youth Pass program as being reconstituted here is back to the formula that I think we had agreed to really at the outset, which is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, where the school district and the city and TriMet are each contributing equal shares. And that actually allows us to reduce our cash contribution to this program in the next fiscal year, or next school year. Our last year, or this year's contribution to the Portland Public School Youth Pass program was, from cash, was about $1.6 million. That would go down to $996,000 and some odd dollars. So that savings would allow us pretty much to fund the regional reduction in the youth fares. And there may need to be a little true-up associated with that of a little bit over 100,000, but within the realm of predictability at this point. So again, these fares would be effective September 2014, and we would like to and certainly recommend your approval when we bring this back to you at your meeting on June 11th. So with that, I would also note you have the staff report and the equity analysis in front of you. Again, presentation of that by John L. at the briefing last month, and be happy to answer any further questions you might have on this.
Thinking, why don't we see if there's anybody that wants to testify further than what we heard, and then we'll get into some questions and comments, okay? So let's open the public hearing on this item. And so this is a public hearing on ordinance 335, and if anybody wants to provide any additional comments on the transit equity study, that would also be welcomed. We did hear from a number of folks in our public forum who were supportive of this, and we do have information in our packets from a number of folks who've provided written testimony on this. I have nobody who's signed up that would like to speak on this item. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on ordinance 335 or the supporting documents to this? Well, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Now, let's go on to questions. Commissioner Esmond, Director.
Joe. To Shelley, a little gun shy. Have we gone all through all the hoops that we need to do with the federal government to?
Very good question.
I mean, I know Janelle is not an attorney. That's
Oh, Fair enough, but
But-
John L. has consulted
Yeah,
very
I just want to know
extensively.
that we're not going to get a gotcha.
No, there is no gotchas. We've double
All right.
and triple checked this. We did do a transit equity analysis on this. The FTA is in the loop. They know that we did one. John L's communicated with them. Our duty to report on that TEA it was every 3 years. You know, we include that with our triennial report to the FTA. So we're good on that. And there was all the public outreach that was done when the transit equity analysis was done too. So.
Okay. And I was wondering, kind of off the subject, not just for TriMet, but for the county and the school district in the city, do we get green credits for this? Offsetting carbon? But- That was, Board Member Esmond, the theory behind the Betsy credits that
There you
originally
go.
funded that. But, so maybe we get moral credit, but it doesn't feel financial right now. Okay. Thank you.
Good suggestion. Other questions or comments from the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Just have a sense of a little bit of caution now in terms of the youth summit recommendations and policies, which I've heard mentioned, but I've not seen, to know if they have any impact or anything that needs to be considered in terms of doing this, of moving forward with the reduction. I'm pretty comfortable with reducing because it does provide for youth across the region, not only just Multnomah County, but all, to be able to participate in this at a reduced part. And yet the Portland Public Schools System PASS program is a separate entity from this. Help me a little bit from what you've seen, or if there's anyone who attended the summit. Is there anything that we might need to be aware of? I guess we will get that hopefully between now and our next meeting, but then that might be at the point where it makes this thing becomes a change and start a process all over
Right.
again.
So let me, Board Member Bethel, let me review a little bit what I saw that came out of that, so to give you an idea, and we will definitely forward those, what we have in terms of the recommendations. Again, it's not a formal recommendation to TriMet at this point in time. It was the minutes or conclusions from the meeting that I saw. And what I saw was generally, I think, concurrence that this was a good step, but wanting to see the youth fare reduced further to $1 or a $2 day pass. So, go further than $1.25. And the other thing that I saw was a lot of recommendations associated with improving service. For example, change frequent service to a 10-minute interval instead of a 15-minute interval. A lot of recommendations associated with enforcement of fares and some of the issues particularly some youth of color, have had with our fare inspectors or the police. So a number of issues that I think are really important for us to address that come out of that as well. And then ultimately recognizing that that the sort of program that is in place with Portland Public Schools or proposed for Portland Public Schools should be something that is extended in their recommendations to all high school students in Multnomah County. So those are the threads that I saw as I read those notes from the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a follow-up to that comment in regards to what Director Bethel was referencing and what Neil just followed up with. All of the conversations that I've had with Opal and Bus Riders Unite have been very consistent with what was just presented. I mean, nothing that Neil just referenced was out of line with the numerous conversations I think many of us have had with Bus Riders Unite and Opal. And so, hence, my comment to referencing what they were talking about. I mean, this is their comments are well worn, and I think we, from a balanced approach of addressing, their key issues that they've raised over time. I think, and our responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we've got a sustainable organization. I think it all comes down to balance, and I certainly think that again, nothing that Neil has just referenced hasn't been stated and clarified previously, and I think we've got to take that information and be responsible and sustainable. So I think this is a good balance from my perspective, and I think your comment is certainly something that is very, I think is very supportive of the process to continue to remain open to what they're looking at and their needs. Sometimes I know personally, I'll tend to move to more of a position of being closed after the similar demonstrations as we had today. But I appreciate your comment to further get my listening ear back out and saying, okay, we do need to make sure that we look at those items and that information that's coming out from these organizations that really are putting a lot of time and effort in doing these things.
Comments? Anything else? Okay, well, what I will say is this again was the first reading of this ordinance. We had the public hearing, provided no other further information we already had in writing or what we heard in the public forum. So this will be scheduled in for the June 11th meeting. That's right. Because we don't have a meeting at the end of June. That will be both our briefing and our business meeting in one, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll look forward to that. And again, as Director Bethel pointed out, if we want to make changes at that time, we can. But we'll start the process over and again, slow down the adoption of this ordinance. But that concludes our business then for the day. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board this morning? If not, then meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.